My name is Paul Eiffeldano, and I work at BIP Capital. Actually, I chair the investment committee. We do early stage venture investing, like digital media. We like SaaS. We like marketing automation, like patient acquisition or patient management. So basically, we're looking for technologies that are transforming or changing industries, giving a company a significant competitive advantage. We like to do early stage, like really early stage. We'll do stuff that is very small revenue. Got to have a product, but early stage revenue, up to a million in revenue. Our round sizes can be 200,000 up to 10 million. But in general, we like to live in the $2 million space. So.
Good evening. My name's Paul Lopez, and see a number of faces I know, probably from other hats that I wear. The one today is as a co-founder of probably the newest venture capital firm, but we are headquartered here. We're the anchor tenant with Karen and Dale, et cetera. And there's no competition once you get outside 285. So we're glad to say that if you don't want to drive inside and be an IT peer and go look for money, there's money here as well, right? And though we started last year, I just counted, I'm hoping that we have quality, but in terms of quantity, we're investing in our 11th company this month. This year alone, we've done 3 follow-on rounds since January and 4 new company investments. So Karen knows how busy we are. In fact, my partner, who should have been on here, is out in Dubai at another conference learning about what else is going on. So, the other reason that some of you may know, but I'd like to at least make sure you know about, is I'm the president of TIE Atlanta. It's the Atlanta base of the world's largest entrepreneurship nonprofit. We're spending this is our 20th anniversary. Short piece to tell you is that if you're an entrepreneur and you're looking for an ecosystem of other entrepreneurs at any stage in any industry, go check us out at atlanta.tie.org. It's something I got into by accident 5 years ago. Best decision. And I know Steve and several others have as well. But here today we'll talk about venture capital.
I'm Lisa Calhoun. I'm the founder of Valor Ventures, and I'm a serial entrepreneur. I haven't been investing but for a few years, but as a serial entrepreneur, started my first company out of my dorm room. And with Valor, which I launched a couple of years ago, I thought there's a definite hole in the ecosystem, and how can we build a firm that will fill it? We launched our first demo fund and closed it in November. We've made 5 investments. We make an investment about once a quarter. And our check size starts at about $150K. And we're investing in really one thing. So if you can remember one thing about Valor, is that we invest in hyper-growth software. That tends to be middleware. So it tends to be B2B, but it doesn't have to be. What we find very compelling is when a founder has organic growth and is looking for maybe not your traditional VC, but someone who could really help them scale. We like to be that partner. And so we have some programs for them within our platform, like a CTO, CIO council. We call it the Innovation Council, that helps take a pipeline or portfolio company and introduce them to people who are going to be able to onboard them more quickly and give them that scale that they need. So we've invested in Atlanta companies. We also try to invest within a day's flight, say, of Atlanta. I mean, if it takes 2 hours to get from here to downtown, kind of the same travel parameter. Yeah. So we've made an investment in Illinois and one in Brooklyn and in Austin, and so that's Valor Ventures. And I wanted to let you guys know, so I'm saying this so that I don't forget, we also have, as part of our pipeline exercise, we benchmark our founders. We want to make sure that we're investing in the best age and stage of those types of founders, and so we really do look for women and minorities particularly hard. They tend not to raise their hands as fast or not be as networked. And so a couple of years ago, we launched the largest pitch competition for women and minority founders in the South, and it's called Startup Runway, and it's May 2nd. If you want to come check it out, there are a lot of great investors there that are also working on the diversity of their pipeline and looking for unusual entrepreneurs that they haven't met before.
Great. I'm Frank Dalton. I'm with Fulcrum Equity Partners here in Atlanta. We're a growth equity fund, so we're a little bit up the food chain. been in business for a while. I joined Cordova Ventures, which is a fairly well-known fund in the early 90s. Joined them in the 94, 95 year period, so been here a good while. They wound down, and I started Fulcrum with a couple other guys. We started off small, $40 million fund. Then we did a $93 million fund, and then we raised a $204 million fund this summer. So we're busy. We got lots of money to invest. We're kind of like, when these people here grow them up, we can take them to the next level, is kind of the strategy. We invest half in healthcare services. So if you think of things like home health, hospice, rehab, various healthcare staffing plays, we've gotten very active regretfully in addiction treatment, which happens to be a pretty good business regretfully. But so all kinds of healthcare services. So that's half of our portfolio. The other half would be B2B, SaaS, recurring revenue, software companies that are growing fast, or maybe a what we would call a managed service, technology-enabled business service, which has some people to it as opposed to pure software. We invest probably check sizes in the, we just did a $4 million round in December in a company called SAS Optics here in town, so maybe $4 million on the low end, and we can go up to $20 million. So we're a good financial partner for life. Raising money is not easy, so if you get with us, we can help you keep going, keep you off the road and raising money. So glad to be here.
Great. So obviously you guys can see, can you hear me? Is that on? That we have some very qualified panelists. So, taking a step back to, you hear angel money, venture capital money, private equity money. We said this is a panel to talk about venture capital. So I'm going to kind of call on you guys. So Frank, I'm going to put you on the spot. Just give your kind of definition of what exactly is venture capital and why these companies want it.
Yeah, so the term venture capital has gotten very blurred over the years now. So it's, used to be, pretty much early stage, revenue, pre-revenue, a lot of risk in management, risk in market, risk in technology. It's gotten a little blurry now to me. So you see venture capitalists and they're putting $100 million in deals. So to me, it's about the risk profile. The earlier stage, the more risky, the risk profile as far as management's not fully, mature. Product might not be fully there. Customers, market, not pricing. There's just a lot of things still moving around that have not been fully baked. So to me, it's about a risk profile. As you go up the food chain, kind of where we're at, where we enter maybe 3-4 million in recurring revenue, if it's a technology company, things are, kind of figured out a bit. And it's more about scaling and putting more fuel into the sales and marketing engine. So to me, venture capital is kind of those earlier stage, a lot of moving pieces from a risk standpoint that need to be figured out. And obviously, the earlier you are, the higher reward and more risk. So that would be my view of it.
Anyone have anything to add to that?
One thing I would add is that sort of how a venture capitalist makes money is by inspiring or causing a company to grow. The further up the food chain or the closer you get to private equity, the more financial machinations or the more layering debt on a company and that sort of thing might be one of the tricks to making money. But at the venture stage, it's really all about this capital is causing the company to get through some of those messy situations or the things that need to be figured out. So we're okay with the company losing money for several years. We just want the capital to, go in make the company go in the right direction.
So Paul, building on that, when's the right time for these guys to ask for venture capital? So, to give you guys just a perspective on Venture Atlanta, everyone applying to Venture Atlanta or participating in Venture Atlanta is not necessarily raising venture capital. They can be raising angel money. They could be looking for, someone to partner with up for $100,000. But, I think for you guys, a lot of times a company's sitting there and they reach a pivotal time when they want to really start approaching venture.
Well, I'm going to answer that two ways. The first is if you're thinking about applying to Venture Atlanta or applying to, any of the startup labs and ecosystem, I'd say giddy up. Go do that. You really want to do that because it's important to have the experience of talking to other entrepreneurs and venture capitalists about in the ecosystem about what your company is doing. And you want to get that experience, you want to raise your profile. But if I were starting a company and if I was thinking about when do I raise, I actually would think about it maybe differently than most entrepreneurs. I would raise capital when I really didn't need it. When I knew, okay, I've got a product, I've got a sales, I've got a lot of things sort of figured out. So I don't really need the capital, but if I take capital on, I can grow even faster. And I encourage that sort of thinking because too often I see, well, I've got this great business idea. If I only had capital, I could get started. And no one's going to finance it's your dream. So you kind of have to make that progress first and be able to stand on your own 2 feet for someone to want to partner with you.
That's right. Anyone have anything to add to that?
Yeah, the only thing I would say is when you raise money, it's a big leap into the world of you have a partner, right? Maybe a marriage partner. And once we're in, it's amazing. When I write the check, all hell breaks loose. Everything was perfect before I wrote the check, but now you have a spouse, and taking that on. You already got a spouse. A lot of you don't want another one, but taking that on is a big leap, and you got to be ready for that because there are governance issues, there are control issues, there are veto issues. There are just a lot of issues when you bring on another partner. There's discipline, there's accountability. You have to kick out your fraternity and sorority sister off the board. So there's some things you got to be ready for that next leap. And I would encourage you to, similar to Paul, is keep plugging, hit more milestones, get a little more meat on the bone so that your story's a little more baked before you really get out there and raise some money.
Just to add to what Frank is saying there, I mean, I see entrepreneurs making the mistake every day because, of course, we have a sales funnel of pipeline, that they are raising money, and they think that that's what they're doing, and they're not actually raising money. So you think you're raising money, but what you actually should be raising is relationships who pay their way forward in your business, and the money you put to work, you have to eat. But the relationships that you get with that money are going to make or break your business, not the money. Because you can find capital if you have a strong business. Capital is almost a commodity. In the private equity world, there's almost $1 trillion of overhang, and we hear things like that here on the ground in Atlanta and think, where is that money? Well, it's there, but it's also something to find when you need to kind of catalyze those relationships. And so if you know how to catalyze the relationships of your potential investors, you have a plan, you have targets, you have things that you need to do, companies you need to get into, then that really narrows the funnel of investors you'll even consider. So I'm talking to one of my portfolio companies last night, and out in San Francisco, and this company's raising some more money, and I was listening to my founder have this insight of, I don't need to talk to these 3 great VCs with wonderful reputations because they have nothing but money to add to our journey, and that'll actually build slower because then I have to deal with ignorance on my board, and so really looking at it as raising relationships that come with capital to pay their way, I think helps.
That is a really good point. And I think that if you are at that place you want to raise money, you need to understand the personality and the mindset of the firm that you're raising money from, because we all approach it super, super differently. I've learned quite a bit from Frank. I have been on the Fulcrum Advisory Board for years now, and he's sort of, I'm going to blame him. He's the one that got me into this business. But we all have different personalities. But analyzing the 80 companies that I've been involved with, I've developed my own roadmap. It's like building a house or a car, building a company. I find we're all humans, and we all struggle with the same things at the same time in the same order. And so I've developed like a roadmap of seriously, it's like, and it plays out every time I make an investment. I work with an entrepreneur, they struggle, and I know exactly 2 months they're going to struggle with this, and they do. Because we're all people, and fundamentally, we deal with those same things. So I have a plan. I'll show them my roadmap, and I'll say, okay, let's work on this part now, because this is where we are in the journey. And so you got to be okay with that, right? Because if you're okay with that, then that's help. That's awesome. If you're not okay with that, that's a pain in the ass. That's meddling. That's someone who's like, bugging you. So you kind of have to pick the personality of, don't just take money. You got to pick the personality of the firm that you're going to partner with as well.
Great point.
Allison, if I can add to that, though, I think I've been on your side of the fence longer than I've been on the side writing the checks. And how many of you are raising money? Here's my question. I always said we didn't want to raise money because with it comes, you just said, the side of headaches or giving away equity. So I really think, I'm not sure about those of you who didn't raise your hands, but it's still said that most firms start off with bootstrapping. It gets you a certain point. You can't do everything that way. You ought to look, by the way, friends and family is the next level where they say 60% of all money tends to come from. So it's not us, as it turns out. And by the way, if you do get married to somebody taking their money that way, that's not necessarily a good thing. You're stuck with them for a long time. Okay, it can come
You
in the
say
form
that like
of,
it's a bad thing.
we paid our friends and family back over 3 years. So that's how long we did it for, kind of deal. When we started in 07, worst time in terms of the recession, et cetera. But the reason I say that is don't just think of venture capital. It's really part of a much bigger pie to the extent you can keep control and not have to work with people who've got to turn in money and results, et cetera. There's certainly that option. And I think Paul said it well. By the way, you probably ought to start at least 6 months before you really need it.
Great. So how many entrepreneurs are in the room? Oh, okay. Lots of entrepreneurs.
So there's a lot of people who didn't raise their hands. I'm not
And,
sure. They came for the food, probably. Right?
And I think that there's
There
a
you
key
go.
point also with with asking for money or raising venture capital with Venture Atlanta. So we're going to open up our call for companies in May, and some of you might go, well, I'm not raising money now, but I want you to think about the fact that Venture Atlanta is in October, and we're looking for companies that are raising money in the next 12 to 18 months. So we're talking like almost 2 years from now. Developing those relationships take a long time. Max Stadium was one of our companies that they raised a bunch of money from Summit Partners last year, and they told me, they're like, hey, just so you know, we met Summit at Venture Atlanta 2 years ago. So sometimes it takes a while to develop those relationships. So think about that.
And by the way, just think of the story that Allison just said. Right? Here it is. Rebecca and Bruno are at Venture Atlanta. They meet, Ernie Garcia. Whoops, they just sold the company and made, gazillions and millions of dollars. So you make good relationships by being on that stage, and it raises the profile of your company. So.
But I'm not trying to do a commercial for Venture Atlanta.
I am.
Paul's on my board too. So
There you go.
We're like tag team here. So I'm going to let you guys all pipe in here, but I'm going to start with you, Paul. So how do you evaluate deals? Tell them what you're looking for.
All right.
Or not Paul. I meant Paul Lopez.
The other Paul.
Okay.
I was talking to the other Paul.
One of the few times there's multiple Pauls on the panel, by the way. We look for three things. And by the way, I didn't answer the first questions. We tend to invest in early stage companies. By early stage, we've sort of moved away from the seed round to post-seed. That's sort of become, or some people call it the traction round, et cetera, more so. And what we look for is three things. We look for an entrepreneur. We're entrepreneurs, by the way. So the reason a lot of deals come to us is not because we're here in Alpharetta, but because I think people know that we've run businesses. And in exiting, we chose not to just go start another business. We thought we could help the community by writing our checks and then having some of you in the audience and others write checks along with us. And what we look for is somebody who's got a great vision in an area that is very clear. You will be amazed how many times you'll see a business plan in which it is not as clear as you think it is, kind of deal. You ought to get your, somebody else to read your business plan who doesn't understand your industry to see if you could make it clearer, et cetera. Number two is we look for a team who can really drive operational excellence. I think that's a term that most people talk about and very few do. Very few do. Operational excellence comes in lots of ways, but it's getting things done. Whether you know what's going on, you know your customers, et cetera. And then the third one is we look for a CEO who is financially very, very sharp at what he or she is doing. You don't typically see that. We don't look for another firm in which you got another CFO. We're looking for the CEO who understands the business and has a tremendous amount of financial acumen. That's not easy, given that we work in the technology area. But I will tell you, it is also not uncommon to find that. That's how we did our businesses. We look for others who sort of exhibit that characteristic.
Lisa, you want to pipe in?
Sure. Well, we're looking for founders who have a great piece of software and they built it or they had someone build it that's also in the firm. So it's not an outsourced piece of software. That great piece of software has customers. It's not perfect. There's 1,000 things they want to add to the feature list, but they've been so busy selling it because their market has a problem that the feature list is long and detailed, and the software may even be slightly ugly. They would prefer to go to market through a distributor or through relationships or integrations because they are essentially a middleware. You know, at their core, they're a back-end tool of some kind. And they know that they want to meet CIOs and CTOs who can just plug and play with that. Maybe there's an implementation process, but it's not too heavy. So they're looking for people with expertise in getting that done. And we can add value to them with those relationships in addition to the capital that we put into place. We're an equity investor, so we don't do convertible notes and safes and those kinds of things. We want to work with a founder that wants a long-term partner at the table. And so they're interested in, for that kind of relationship and a little bit of capital, parting with a reasonable amount of equity. And that's usually a conversation that we have with them. We're really transparent, and we're looking for that kind of relationship back from founding teams too, that just really lay their cards on the table. If we can help, we help, and if we can't help, that's all good. I had a conversation with a founder in robotics who's building a robotics platform. It's middleware software. It's being used in places like FedEx. We help them make several connections, including to Boeing Defense. But it's not going to be a great deal for both of us, and so very happily, had a conversation yesterday, walked away, wishing each other the best. And that happens quite a bit. So a lot of clarity and communication style, rather than, there is a type of founder, still can be very smart and very well liked, but that is, I'm going to play a shell game with this investor, that investor, this investor, and my knowledge is in keeping the shells moving. That's not a good style for us because we really do want to help, and there's plenty of interesting businesses out there.
Frank?
Yeah, so one thing to keep in mind is depending on what your strategy is as an investor, you are looking for different things. Each people here are a little bit different, I think. All four of us a little bit different as far as the ecosystem of fundraising. So we're all looking for maybe something different. So we're a growth equity investor. So our companies are a little more mature. They're 3, 4, 5, 6 million recurring revenue. They're growing 30% a year, 40% a year. They're a little more expensive. But our job is to go in there and see, is there a team, is there a product, is there a market that can get it to 20 million of recurring revenue where we can then sell it to another group that's going to overpay for it. That's what we want to do. So we want to underpay and grow it to someone overpays. But so what do we look for? We look for fast growth, which means the dogs are eating the dog food every day. So they're 30, 40% a year. I mean, I don't know how many companies grow that fast, 50% a year. It's not easy to do. And then we have to have a management team that is ability to do that and grow that. And that's not easy to do. So you have management teams over here that are a little bit different maybe than the management team I'm investing in, potentially.
Oh, yeah.
So it's just a little bit different, but you know, our strategy here at Fulcrum and the reason for the name is we're getting in there and providing some money, growth equity money to throw into sales and marketing where we can get that company to the next level. And at each level, there's different challenges, people challenges, product challenges, all kinds of different things. So I think we're all looking for a little bit different things depending on when you're investing.
Paul?
So hard to add to that because those are all super good answers. So I'm going to steal. I'm going to amplify something that Lisa said because it really is at the core of what I think, like the number one thing is, okay, look, you only get to boil it down to one thing or the most important thing or the thing that's most predictive of success. And it's nothing to do with the financials, it's nothing to do with how good the software is and how, whether it's spaghetti code or good code or whatever. It's nothing to do with any of that. The number one predictor of success for all of the 80 investments that I've analyzed, the thing that has a number one, a one coefficient of correlation, is the EQ of the leadership team. And so that's the first thing I look at. If there's a founder or a founding team that is completely self-aware, hey, I'm good at this, but I suck at finance, and so therefore I recognize I need to get somebody on my team to augment. It's like if someone does not have the EQ, they don't understand their strengths and weaknesses, if they can't listen carefully to customer feedback, all of that is the most predictive thing. That, look, you gotta have drive, you gotta be smart, you got all of those things are you gotta. But the secret sauce, the magical thing at that very early stage is the EQ piece. And so I have my own ways of sort of getting that. And I don't think it's something that you can teach. It's like you have to be okay in your own skin and understand that you may be the founder of a company, but you're never going to be successful unless you can surround yourself with really good people. And that EQ is that magic ingredient that causes some founders to attract amazing teams where they're all super strong, and other founders to struggle to hire really good people, to hire the guy that was in their fraternity 15 years ago. And there's no comparison in the performance of those two types of teams.
Yeah.
So.
I'll add just one thing since we're talking about people. I got into business in '94, so I've been involved in a lot of deals. So I think if I went back and I've analyzed all the deals I've done, some good, some bad, it's always been ones where I've gotten the people right eventually. So I challenge you at any stage, always challenge the people you have and try to hire better people, better than you. And it takes time, even at growth equity, where you think you got a good team, mature team, that's going to go to the next level. Even at that stage, you don't quite have the people right. You think you do after you write the check, but then you find out that you don't. So at any stage, I think you're always challenging yourselves to find better people. I mean, people that start companies aren't necessarily ones that can get them to 3-4 million, and people that are in companies that are 5 million of revenue, aren't necessarily the ones who get it to 10 or 15 or 20. So this whole people thing and evolving and challenging yourself, and if you're not, to Paul's point, the good people bring in people better than them. So
Apparently, our second Paul can't talk anymore. We will still be
Talking
able to
about you
hear him,
this time.
I'm sure.
I
So,
guess I didn't say smart enough things. It's like a musical chair. We all lose our microphones after we say it.
Hit a quota.
So obviously, you guys have a hard job. I mean, obviously, you get a ton of emails, ton of calls. People are, God knows. I mean, again, Rebecca, followed Ernie Garcia into a bathroom, to get your attention. So, how does an entrepreneur really grab your attention? What is the best way for them to reach out to you? Will you take their calls? Will you, read the emails? What's the best way? Who wants to start?
Miller Lite for me.
Buy Frank beer, then you're good.
No. Look, I think we're pretty accessible, so all of us here are very approachable and accessible.
And by the way, Christian's down in Tampa. I don't
Yeah.
know what part of Florida you're in.
Okay.
He'll meet you there for another
St.
Miller
Pete.
Lite, right?
St. Pete.
There you
St.
go.
Pete Beach. Yeah,
Frank
we're very
Frank
approachable.
commutes between
We're very
Florida and
approachable, but we do see a lot of deals. I mean, Fulcrum, we're seeing 1,200 deals a year, so you can do the math per day. A lot of things come through from various places, so there's a lot of noise. Clearly, if you find a referral source or some, accountant, lawyer, other fund, et cetera, gets a little higher weighting. Active in these conferences, networking. I think we like to, personally, I like to meet people, even though maybe it's not a deal we do, because you never know. One thing we do a lot of is meet with companies, because they might be $1 million in revenue, but you blink your eye and next Monday they're $3 million in revenue, and sometimes they go right by you. So I think we're pretty approachable, but it's always And deals come from all over the place, emails, and if you're going to send me a blind email and it just doesn't get the attention that a referral from someone, who's maybe knows you, can, this is a deal I looked at, it's not for me, but good people, or this is one of my clients, it goes a long way. We're here to meet as many companies and people as we can. Sometimes I'm in full-time people business, so I like to meet more people, I like to see more deals, so we meet a lot, and I think we're fairly approachable.
Yeah, so I'll just repeat and then maybe give you an idea to think about. How many incubators here in town or accelerators do you think there are?
Too many.
There
Couple
aren't.
dozen.
A lot.
You only got to get one right.
A
right?
lot.
There's about a dozen or so, I think,
Is there?
approximately kind of deal.
More than that.
I think Paul said a little while
30.
ago, it's a great ecosystem. And we've looked at the deals we've done, and most of them have come from referrals. I will tell you, a warm introduction is the easiest way to get introduced quickly, make it meaningful, et cetera. And so if you look at places like Alpharetta Tech, or Tech Alpharetta, ATDC, Tech Square Labs, et cetera, great ways for you to learn, but also then to network into a warm introduction. It just helps get on the calendar quicker, I think.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I would tell you that, so if you're in an incubator lab or accelerated lab, whatever, it gives you some exposures, because we know that those are good fishing ponds. Because think about it, the very act of going to an incubator lab means that you're open to suggestions, you're open to learning, which is at least one of my criteria. And so they're usually good places to go. And then, you'll catch our eye. You may not get selected to be in Venture Atlanta, but if you've gone through the process and applied, guess what? There's like about 20 super influential people who've looked at your write-up, who perhaps have talked to you at some point or other, and it just raises your profile. So number one is I try and raise a profile. The second is when you get an opportunity to speak to a venture capitalist that you're interested in forming a relationship with, think about, remember when you dated, because I'm assuming most of you are past your dating age, but okay, it was inappropriate. That won't be the last inappropriate thing I say.
Is that a wedding ring?
And Paul, it is on video,
was
by the
smart.
way, so it's
Thank you,
it is
thank
now
you.
worldwide.
What's your type?
But no, the point is that
Swipe
when you're
left, I
dating,
think,
the
is what
first
they
thing
do.
that we're doing is we're just getting to know you. So we just want, if you will, the 20-minute pitch, and we're gonna ask you questions. We're gonna ask you for some follow-up information. The biggest turnoff is when we ask, hey, we need to see the cap table, like to see the financials for the last year, want to see your projections for next year. When we ask for follow-up information, the biggest turnoff is crickets or it's crap. So
By the way, in both directions.
That is
because
a
I think
huge
you also
turnoff.
complain about when we don't respond. So.
It's like if you're trying to raise money and someone's trying to help you do that by asking for financials, which will help with an investment thesis, and you're like, I don't share those. It's like, okay, what did you think we were doing here? So I am a little bit different, though, from some of the answers that we just heard in that, and those are very typical. And of course, I don't turn down a warm introduction. But I prefer not to have a warm introduction. I prefer a cold outreach with a rationale. I want to hear your reason for why Valor, because we're an early stage investor. We don't have that much capital to deploy. We do a very specific thing and we do it super well. So if you know that, that shows me how networked you actually are. That shows me that maybe you've heard of Valor, you know our network already from our performance and the relationships that we already have. So that tells me more about you, that you just cut straight to the chase and said, because of this, that, or the other thing, I've reached out to you. And this is what we're hoping for, and this is what we'd like, and we wonder if you'd also be interested. So that means a lot to me, because it tells me that the entrepreneur is looking in a rational way for smart capital. And a lot of times a relationship-based introduction is the easy introduction, and that is typically not, in my experience, the best for your business. Sometimes it is, but sometimes it's just the easy one. And lazy is not something that I invest into.
Lisa is
You
a
want-
PR guru.
Lisa's going to get a bunch of emails.
I'm sending all my emails over to her.
She'll like,
You have 500 emails tomorrow, so.
I'm
you want
used to
her
it.
email,
Send it
by the
on.
way?
Yeah,
But-
to just to elaborate a little bit on the point, because if you are raising money, it does make some sense, a thoughtful approach, targeting funds that make sense for where you are, what you do, et cetera, et cetera. You know, I don't mind meeting some people that are early stage because I kind of enjoy it and maybe I can help, but your time is better spent focusing on firms who invest in your stage and invest in things that you do so they can add value. And there's, you know, we get some things from, you know, medical devices and pharma and biotech, and it's just not what we do, and it's a waste of time. But targeting, you know, sitting back and be thoughtful of your fundraising approach, I think will serve you well than, you know, wasting your time with funds that really aren't going to help you at all and not add value.
And definitely lean on people in the community. You know, when I started with Venture Atlanta 11 years ago, I mean, I'm not joking that I sat in a meeting and said, an angel, you know, what are you talking about? I really didn't understand. So, you know, if you're a new entrepreneur, or you really just don't know where to go, ask questions, you know, ask people for help. There's some, you know, wonderful people in this community that are there to help you. So, so obviously, you know, this whole ecosystem has grown so much, and there's so much going on in this community. How do you guys, you know, do you all go to pitch events, which, you know, I kind of know this answer, but how do you decide what you go to, and what are you looking for? I mean, are you looking for companies to invest in, you know, like, do you hope you come out of a pitch event with someone to follow up with? You can go.
Can I go first? Oh, good. I definitely do. Look, I have certain investment theses that I follow. I believe that, like, for example, in influencer marketing. I mean, when I grew up, it was Walter Cronkite, and everybody knew who he was. He was the most trusted and well-known man in America. That doesn't exist anymore.
Walter, who?
Yeah, I know. Yeah, because you're so much. So
That's why we kept them separated by Lisa and me. We knew
we
all
get
about
to do
it.
this
Yeah.
again next week
we
do.
in Charleston. So, but today it's like micro influencers. So influencers it's more democratized and it's more micro in nature. So that is like one of my, if you will, I see that as a huge shift in society and in the media industry. So I look for things that kind of match that. I want to invest in industries that match my investment theses and where I think that, you know, there's a tailwind. I saw this brilliant business that it was, but it was in the media in the billboard industry, and it's like, okay, kind of cool, but I don't know what to do with that. So when I go to those, I look for things that are consistent with the themes that I believe are going to change the world.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, we go to them all. And, you know, earlier stage and later stage. I mean, it's like to see what's going on out there. I mean, you know, we have a pretty broad group of people here at the firm now. At Fulcrum, we have a biz dev guy, so we're getting a broader reach of what's going on out there. But you know, we like to attend all those events and network and meet other investors and find out what these early stage companies are doing. And you know, you'll find some that are, boy, I love the team, but just a little too early. Let's keep in touch. You know, building a relationship. A lot of the deals that get done, certainly in my world, the growth equity, start early on in many cases. You know, there might be a company we like, everything's perfect, but you're just a little too early as far as just revenue run rate. It could be as simple as that. But it's our job to stay in touch, and when you're you know, build a relationship, and then when you want to raise that nice round, you say, oh, geez, he's kept in touch, he's value add, et cetera, good guy, somebody I like to do business with. So we spend a lot of time at these conferences.
You know, Allison, we do go to pitch competitions, but it's not to write checks. I think a lot of people think that's what the pitch competition's about. We go to
Make
start the
connections.
conversation, right? Because as we said, the conversation is going to take. Right now, we're sort of full up with everything we're going to do through the summer, but we certainly want to talk to people who may become our fall or winter deals. I was just thinking in Venture Atlanta, which you all do a great job just looking at the massive applications. I'll do a plug for it. If you haven't applied for Venture Atlanta, do. No, you really. Whether you make the 30 companies or whether you're the part of the 300, you'll get coached, and that's got a big plus to it, right? What else should you be doing as well? But I was just thinking, and I don't know if you've done this over the 11 years, you ask the companies for a lot of information about them. You give us the one-pager, and then you get the 8-minute deal. I think you ought to ask us about what do we invest in. I'm not sure we're very clear, and I think it would be helpful instead of when you're at that table of booth, why didn't we also sort of say, we are in early stage, what does that mean? Early stage has a lot of meaning, just like venture. Maybe this would be a better way to get marriages made, at least for
We
relationships.
actually do a little bit of that. So basically, when an investor actually registers for Venture Atlanta, they have to answer some questions. So it's, how often are you in Atlanta? What size fund do you have? What types do you invest in? And last year, we actually provided all of our companies that were selected with a profile of the investors.
Good.
So, and it's, we don't per se match everyone one-on-one. We do ask the entrepreneurs to do some of their
Instead
homework.
of trying to talk to dozens of us, maybe you just talk to the
Yes.
quartile that's more
Yeah.
more
And what's-
likely to connect.
What's
right?
different about Venture Atlanta is we actually encourage the one-on-one meetings. So we actually set up a mobile app where basically the presenting companies are in
Yeah.
there, the investors are in there, and they do their connecting. I mean, we've had companies had 30 meetings at Venture Atlanta. We've had investors that'll sit all day and just have meetings. So the bottom line is that you want these events to be worth your time, and worth your while. So we hope we make it great for all of you. So moving on, I thought this was kind of interesting. So if obviously you guys get a lot of deals, if there's something that you can't fund, maybe it's not in your sweet spot. Maybe again, Frank, it's not growth equity. Do you guys make referrals to other VCs? Like, do you really work with kind of the ecosystem and your partners?
As sort of a relative newcomer to the VC world here, I will tell you that Atlanta has many more partnerships than you would realize, and we tend to know one another. Whether it's through Sig Mosley or John and Wei Chen, or whether it's through Mark and Paul or wherever it is, or Philip, et cetera. So I would say that it happens in both directions. I think Atlanta tends to have more partnership. That's my perception as well. I know you went out to Silicon Valley last week. What was your perception there?
So Silicon Valley was interesting. So how many people have been to Silicon Valley? Seriously, I've run Venture Atlanta for 11 years and had never been. So I had this vision that it was going to be this grandiose place, that it was going to be kind of like New York, where there was going to be these beautiful buildings, and Greylock and Sequoia and and Andreessen Horowitz were on the top of the building, and I was going to walk into these elaborate conference rooms. And we were driving down Sand Hill Road, and I'm looking at Philip Lewis from Fulcrum Equity Partners, and I looked at him, I go, "Where is it?" And he's like, "This is it, Alice."
We're there.
And I was like, "What?" I mean, we went into this big fund that was like $1.5 billion fund in an office like the size of this room. Like they were like, "Here's your Dasani water," like nothing, nothing fancy. And they knew nothing. They really were. We met with 8 funds. They didn't know a ton about what was going on in Atlanta, but what was so cool is they were interested in hearing about it. And a lot of these funds were like, "We got a lot of capital to deploy." And they're like, "We'll get on a plane and come to Atlanta." They were not geographic agnostic. They were not like, "Hey, we'll only invest in the Valley." We met with Lightspeed Venture Partners, huge fund. I mean, billion, money. And they were like, "Well, we don't come to Atlanta. We're looking for the next $1 billion idea." So like, they don't, so, some of these funds don't think we have the next $1 billion idea. And of course we said, of course we do. So it's a different world out there. Then we went to San Francisco the next day. It was a little more flashy, a little bit. Not that much, but it was amazing that, again, someone who's run this huge venture conference for 11 years had no clue what she was looking for. So it was pretty funny. But yeah, so anyone else like having fun with partnerships?
We try. It'd be nice to be able to spend time, and some company comes in and they're too small, and spend another 3 hours trying to connect in with people. We try to do the best we can. We try to give some names. I wish there was more ability to do that, but with a lot of deals we see, it doesn't happen as often. We might say, too small. Here's Norm Mosley, BIP, and et cetera, but and then when you do that, they come back to you and say, and it turns into like an engagement, So it just takes, and we try to do some of that, especially with the early ones. We try to connect them with some angels, angel groups, and those kind of things. But with kind of the volume we have, it just doesn't happen as much as I would like. But
That makes sense. Lisa, who do you guys partner with? Like, who are you looking with? Like, who's kind of who's funneling you the most deals?
CEOs and other entrepreneurs for the most part. And so a lot of our investors are former CEOs who made their wealth by building tech businesses. And then when it comes to our innovation council of CTOs and CIOs, a lot of them are finding things that are amazing because they got pitched and they did a trial and they loved it. And so they share it among council members and we get to hear that. So on the relationship level of inbound deal flow, we see a lot of rising stars come that way. And I would say that we go to pitch competitions, I love them. I absolutely love hearing business ideas. I don't care if I've heard it 35 times. I want to hear it again. What's the new way? How do you see it? And I think that, to confess, my addiction is learning. And I feel like I've heard some of the same businesses now for years. And it's actually wonderful because it has so educated me, so many brilliant, bright minds talking about how they see a market in Boston, in San Francisco, in Chicago, in Austin, in Nashville, that it's easier to spot the rising star. It's easy to find the comet, much easier than if you've just heard it one or two times. So I'm pretty addicted to pitch competitions, but not for looking for deal flow, but for looking for those levers of differentiation that really show the one who's going to win a significant market share because they really are differentiated. And so in terms of actual companies that we typically talk with, Social Capital in Silicon Valley, we're part of their capital as a service platform. So that allows us to bring additional capital to a deal from Silicon Valley when it meets their metrics, which are very similar to ours. We're part of the Revolution network of investors that allows us to bring additional capital when the deal's right from the Steve Case Revolution Rise of the Rest group. So we look for people who are aligned on that hyper growth idea I was talking about and who see a vision outside of the valley. And that's the kind of network we tend to bring around a deal. If someone comes to us and they're pitching cute fuzzy animals that listen to your baby's heartbeat, which is obviously not middleware, not software, I don't have much for them. Occasionally, I will send an email back and say, I don't know much about this. In all humility, most VCs don't know much outside their area. I mean, we're human. We're just kind of like narrow. I think these firms or funds might have a history, but I usually tell entrepreneurs to please use Crunchbase. It's not perfect. That is not perfect. But you can research deals of your age and stage and see who has invested in companies like yours and build your own list and work a process. And so I usually recommend that, and I figure that it's better advice than the last 5 investors I think I ran into in that space.
That's a great comment. So do you guys give any more slack or consideration to serial entrepreneurs, those that have a proven track record? Someone had a big exit, they're coming back to you for your next deal. Do they have more leeway with you?
absolutely. I mean, certainly in the stage we're at, I mean, having repeat entrepreneurs, is a good thing because it's hard. First time entrepreneurs, it's pretty tough. And I don't mind if they failed. If they failed, that's fine. It's okay with me. We're not as lenient here as maybe in California on that. But if you've been out there and it didn't pan out, but you've learned a lot and you come around again, and you're going to be a hell of a lot better next time around. But we love to back people we backed before. I mean, you got a relationship. You know how you work. They know how you work. Vice versa. So, but you don't always have that opportunity to back repeat entrepreneurs. But we certainly like people who've been there, done it, know how it works, know the effort it takes, the passion.
Similar, we made a huge study at this, and I'm going to draw a distinction between the founder, the genius who thought of the idea, and the, if you will, the CEO or the management team. The founder, if you look at the repeat success rates for a founder of a business, usually the serial entrepreneur is usually has a way lower chance of being successful. And guys, go talk to Merrick first, and he's shown me this data. I didn't believe him at first. It's like, look, a founder had that genius idea that if it's lightning, it usually doesn't strike. Matter of fact, the second time around has an even lower likelihood of success than someone who's never had founded a business before. Reverse is true if you look at CEOs, CFOs, heads of sales. The management teams, if they've done it once successfully, they have a way higher likelihood of success. And so I don't know what to do with that data other than, gosh, all of my best investments are things that were introduced to me by CEOs that I'd previously invested in. All of my best leads come from introductions from those CEOs. And, I think about the world way differently, because if you think about that, it's like, oh, that could get really, really clubby. It actually doesn't. It causes us to be super diverse. BIP has made more investments in female entrepreneurs, female CEOs than anybody else in the city. We've got 25% of our investments are female founders or female CEOs. 20% of our investments are diverse CEOs, so people of color, etc. We're not proud of that. We're not exactly where we want to be, but we've made a significant progress there. But it is interesting how that spark, that creative spark, sometimes does not always transfer. But that makes sense, because at the later stage, think about what Frank is doing.
Different game.
Yeah, it's all about the management team, and that is it. Those guys, it's like, when this sales guy goes to a company, the sales guys are following the money. They know if that person's going to go there. They vetted that product, and they know that they can sell it. So, way higher propensity to be successful.
Thank you. Okay, so kind of shifting gears a little bit. A lot of you, as you're building your company, or probably sit there and go, when is it time to build my advisory board, or how many advisors do I need, and do I need a board of directors at some point? Can you guys talk a little bit about advisory boards and board of directors? And Paul Lopez, why don't you start with that?
I don't know that there's a magical answer to it, but I would say that if your advisory board is made up of only people that you knew 5 years before you started the company, that's probably the wrong advisory board. And frankly, that's the more common advisory board out there. As we look at Thai companies that are first-time entrepreneurs, et cetera, building, they tend to ask people they know versus people that really fit a bigger jigsaw puzzle. So I'd say that might be something to think about. I don't know that there's a magic time to having one. I will say that as check writers, it does matter to us. How you build it, I think there's not one magic way to do it. I don't know there's a magic way to say it's 3 or 5 or 7. All I would say is, does that board really add value? Are they strategic partners for you? Have they invested? I think that matters to us. That says somebody's actually taken skin in the game beyond the founding team, et cetera.
Yeah, I mean, if you're, doing something in the hospitality business and you have the former head of JW Marriott, or like
Correct.
someone that's really going to lend credibility. I know when I've sat through, meetings where we're evaluating companies for venture and land, I mean, you guys look pretty closely on, who else is involved.
Well, especially if you can get an advisory board that not just opens doors, but really fills in gaps that you don't have, that really can get to the bigger marketplace. Our biggest investment is in a media tech company that's in the Northeast. Okay, there aren't many media tech companies down here in the Southeast, as it turns out. But they've got on their board folks who are from, the head of advertising once upon a time from Ford, or from really large companies who've written checks, by the way, just like we did. That gives us a comfort level that they know what's going on, right?
Frank, how closely do you guys look at advisory boards?
Yeah, advisory boards. Yeah, I mean, I see a lot of that. People throw a bunch of names up there and they're not doing anything. So I like an active. If you're gonna put some names up there, they need to match what you're doing and contribute and are actually active. And they're investors in the company. All that adds to the credibility of the story. Obviously, a lot of companies we invest in don't have formal boards yet. I mean, obviously, that's a requirement when we invest, is to put together a kind of a formal board, some independent people. The bottom line is, it's always good to get as smart as people around your company as possible. On various issues. If you're a tech guy, you need some sales and marketing DNA around your company somewhere. So always surround yourself with as smart of people as you can. Call them advisory board members or whatever. As long as they're helpful and you're managing them, you're actually using them. Because we might call them up and the guy will say, well, geez, I haven't heard from Joe.
I'm on that deck.
6
And
months.
by the way, we tend to call a couple of them,
and,
so
so-
don't assume
Yeah.
that you're just going to show us a slide and that we're not going to
If you're
check
gonna-
references
If you're going
out.
to do
We're writing
advisory
checks,
board,
right? So,
make sure it's complimentary what you're
Yeah.
doing. Make sure they're active, invested, great. And I'm all for boards.
you guys
Certainly at
all-
our stage. So.
Do you guys all take board seats in your investments?
about half of them, in our case. I mean, we're relatively new. I suspect Arul and I are going to run out of bandwidth at some point, right? So,
We have 1 or 2, and then our observer rights. So we have young associates come. We come with a lot of people.
Right now, 3/5 of our investments have some board participation,
You got-
and 2/5 don't. We're really trying to actively help them scale, and if we're the key person at that stage for this, carrying the baton for this year, then yeah, we want to be on the board. If we're going alongside an investor we trust and we know they've got the baton, that's not the same.
I need to figure that out. That sounds like a lot more fun than what I'm
Yeah,
doing.
yeah.
I don't think I've ever
It is
made
fun, Paul.
I don't think I've ever made an investment where I'm not on the board. And part of that is, before I merged with BIP, I didn't make an investment if I didn't have the personal bandwidth to really jump in and help the company. But I would say that it's very consistent with BIP's philosophy too. So I don't think we have made a single investment where we're not on the board and not really doing some of the heavy lifting or attempting to.
But
in
Paul,
terms of
what
helping.
about if you were a sidecar? I mean, not necessarily the lead investor, right? I mean, there are different kind of investments that people are looking for.
Yeah, but I keep thinking of like all the sidecars that I've done with, with
It
you
depends.
guys or with the sheesh or
Whoever.
whatever.
There's,
It's like,
there's a lot of fun. There's a lot of side people
Yeah.
come in
So
and
we
throw
know
in.
that on your slides, you're
Yeah.
going to have Paul's picture as your advisory board and board member in 99% of the time.
and I'm not
right?
saying
Okay,
that's
now
a
we
good
know,
thing. I'm
so,
thinking I must be
yeah.
doing something wrong.
I mean, if Fulcrum's putting in,
Yeah.
$5 million and Paul has got his group and they're putting in 250, you're not going to get a board seat. So
Correct.
it depends
It is
on
check-
it depends on the
Check
relationship.
size dependent.
It
right?
depends on the relationship and who the lead is and how many
Sure.
board seats you want. I mean, you don't want necessarily 7 board seats, so you got, you don't want too many people. I mean, so it just depends on the relationship and your investing philosophy. I mean, you don't need to be a board member of all these deals. We do. We're writing pretty big checks and we need to know what's going on.
Everything's happening right.
Well,
So I'm going to ask a couple more questions really quick, and then we will open it up to questions. But this is always my favorite question. But
What's your favorite color?
and I'm going to let Paul. So what's the biggest mistake you've seen an entrepreneur make? But I know you've seen many.
Biggest or most consistent? You know what?
Fair.
Biggest. It's actually, at least my biggest mistake is a deal that we were in together. So I'm going to shoot it out and say this
it was
one
a great
first.
evening until you brought that up.
Yeah,
Was it with
You're
Miller
wel-
Lite or
You're
after?
welcome.
Yeah.
No,
No.
this was eons ago. This was years and years and years ago. Must
It
have been
seemed like yesterday.
Yeah, it does seem like yesterday. The biggest mistake was here was an entrepreneur who would go to a meeting and then he would be all excited. He'd come back and report to the board, oh my gosh, this customer liked it. They're going to give us a $7 million contract and da-da-da. And it was so like clear and convincing that this was going to happen. And I'm like, but wait, these things never seem to materialize. And so finally, we had hired like a head of sales, and this head of sales was someone I knew I had helped personally select. Well, he came back from the meeting and said, what? they kind of like this thing, but this is like eons away from doing a deal. I don't think we'll even get $100,000 out of them, let alone $7 million. And the entrepreneur was so, and to be a good entrepreneur, you have to have that glass is half full. You have to be that optimist, but you also have to have a little bit of a view of reality. And the biggest mistake is just not willing to see reality. He just wanted to see the world the way he wanted it to be. It was like he lived in a cartoon.
And ultimately, you two got out of this deal.
It didn't work out.
Paul Lopez, you want to
Okay.
get your?
I just want to make sure, the question was what the entrepreneur's mistake or our mistake?
No,
Or
the biggest mistake you've seen an entrepreneur make.
both? Okay, fair enough.
Our mistake was investing in
No, that's fair, but look, as an entrepreneur, I've sat in your seat, and I'll tell you the top 3 things to think about. If ever you forget this, we don't want to write a check either, and that is, we've all gone through Economics 101 and in business school, and remember the term cash is king? I find that entrepreneurs who don't focus on cash every single day, if you focus on cash, you will solve 99% of your problems. And if you're not focused on it and you want to tell stories about orders versus cash, okay, they're not the same, by the way, et cetera, but we hear a lot about orders. We hear a lot about trials. We hear a lot about proofs of concept. So I'd say the biggest mistake is when you forget about how do you really focus on cash every day. And I mean by every day. I mean, it's 7 days a week. I've sat in your shoes. I will tell you the times where we got this close to running out of cash is not a pretty time. By the way, that's the worst time to go ask a venture capitalist for money as well. So I know you think about it, but it's one of those that if I asked you how much cash do you have, what's your likelihood of what you will end this month with at cash, I'd love to see how right you are as to your cash position at the end of this month. Today's the 17th, 13 days from now. Here's my challenge to you. Forecast it and see if you're within 1 or 2%.
Do you think he likes CFOs?
Look, we're all writing checks for some reason, right? You're asking us to come alongside you. That's what we do, by the way. in
And
11
every
years,
entrepreneur
right?
does that hockey
Okay.
stick. I mean, every entrepreneur
Everyone.
does. You know,
And by
I'm
the
gonna
way-
go from $2 to $50 million in 3 years.
No, by the 3rd quarter of this year. I've seen those hockey sticks. By the way, we've seen the same charts, Larry, with the Angels meetings, right? We saw them 2 years ago. See them now. This hockey stick has still moved to the right. So if you just focus on cash, I'll tell you, it's when you don't do that. So my answer is when you forget about it just because it becomes a saying versus an actual habit of what you do.
Lisa?
Well, I think let's take character flaws off the table because those I think we can all agree are unrecoverable. But within the issue of business mistakes, I think the biggest mistake is to think that there are unrecoverable biggest mistakes. I mean, the entrepreneur is in charge with figuring it out. And there will be mistakes of omission, commission, team mistakes, failure to predict a market, customer went out of business you couldn't know. That's the very definition of what it's like to be an entrepreneur. And so I think that the biggest flaw is to think that there's an unrecoverable blink. To teach yourself to believe that can create failure because you can't think or position yourself around it. And so, that to me is a big potential mistake. Like, we'll never make it if this doesn't happen. You certainly not with that kind of thinking. So having confidence in yourself and your team, and we don't know the answer today. Here's how we're going to figure out the answer. Here's how we're going to bring team around the answer. Here's how we're going to get our advisors around the answer. We're going to blow open our ways of answering this problem. I think there's almost always in business, if you had a good company that was investable at some point, there's almost always a way to figure it out. You just may not know it today.
That's great. Frank?
I'll give a few kind of recent ones. There's a lot of them. One jumps out at me is not firing people when you know they ought to be fired. All of us are guilty of that. Sometimes you just wait too long, and you know deep in your gut that this person is not the right person for the job or the stage or whatever. Usually doing it quickly. And the other one I'll say is kind of product excellence. I don't think people spend enough time on their product development, and having the best product they possibly can. Especially if you have a sales and marketing leader and he's out there, sometimes the product lags. One I'll mention is when you're raising money, being unrealistic about valuation. You might miss out on a deal because you're way out of range. I mean, a lot of times you're way out of range, but if we're over here and you're way over here, we can't even find a happy medium. So that'd be another one. And then another one is just on the exit side, just not selling when you need to sell. I mean, I've seen a lot of entrepreneurs lose a lot of money because they wasn't the right price or wasn't enough money, timing, whatever. But the exit side of the business, there's a time to sell. It might not be your 10x, it could be a 4x. But those are a few things just more recent that came out that,
Pigs get fat, hogs get slaughtered.
you know, taking advantage, you know. So there's just a lot of things. Focus would be another one where entrepreneurs lose focus. They're all over the place and they're not, they get scope creep and they're chasing things they shouldn't be chasing, and they should be selling direct when they're, we're going to channels. I mean, there's just that tight focus, laser focus of your mission. And so there's a lot of things you get off track in this business. So
Definitely.
Yeah.
So, you know, and for Venture Atlanta or any of these pitch competitions too, tell your story. Tell your story. You know, why did you, why is your product different? What is the differentiation in the market? I mean, everyone's, we did this funny video, and it was, stuff entrepreneurs say, and every entrepreneur says, the market is, $10 trillion. And if we just get 0.5% of that, market, and it's so funny, or we're going to pivot. And when we pivot, we're going to have this. So, just be realistic in everything. And again, lean on people. If you're looking to apply to Venture Atlanta, you could send me, your information and say, is this in line with what I should be talking about? Ned Hill's in the back. He's in charge of our selection committee this year. Raise your hand, Ned. And,
oh, good. Send the emails to Ed.
All the ones Lisa doesn't answer
no
are
offense,
going to
but
Ned, right?
but honestly, we want to look at good applications. I mean, there's companies. I mean, a couple years ago, we were like, this is the format to follow, and someone sent us a 2-sentence paragraph. You're not going to get selected if that's what you do. So anyway, I'm going to open it up for questions. I hope you guys learned something. This was definitely a lively group, but we have time for some questions.